History of construction, then, can be seen more broadly as related to the history of technological culture, at the intersection of mathematical and social sciences. And it's no wonder then, in this view, that some very different human sciences, such as anthropology and archaeology, which both were developing initially, whose initial development also took place in the 18th century, played or have played a significant role in defining how historians interrogate construction down to the present day. Anthropology, on the one hand, casts light on construction as a human practice and as a universal response to basic human needs. In this sense, and we are seeing in these images, let's say, symbolic construction of the first hut is an anthropological act, is an act related to the nature of society and the nature of man, okay, before being a first step in a sort of a scientific approach to construction. For anthropologists, construction is collective, anonymous, based on repeated and shared actions. Archaeology, on the other hand, and we are seeing here a plan, one of the first, well, an early 19th century plan of Pompeii. Archaeology provides new rational methods to study the material evidence of the past. It is therefore a discipline well suited to study specific sites, individual objects, buildings, and series of built artifacts, to translate them into documents and drawings, in numbers maybe even, to provide precious factual evidence crucial to a well-grounded historical interpretation. Under the archaeologist's eye, even the most simple objects and the most basic information about them, for example, the series of brick measurements performed by medieval archaeologists on medieval walls, okay, even the most basic information such as this, if carefully recorded, may provide insight on a vast amounts of aspects of construction, from labor organization to economy to chronology. Given that both these disciplines, archaeology and anthropology, along with history of science, along with the history of the techniques of production, have first developed in the late 18th century, it is not surprising that the first attempts in writing construction history itself also date from this period. It's not that an interest in construction was not present before, but the first formalized attempts to write construction history date from the late 18th century. Jean Rondelet, the French architect and engineer, we have him here, okay, with a little bit these crazy eyes, but let's go back to one of his projects. Jean Rondelet, the French architect and engineer in charge of the construction of the Pantheon in Paris, after the death of Soufflot, has been credited with the honor of being the first formal construction historian. Rondelet had produced a winning entry for an academic competition in 1799. A winning entry, an essay, a written essay, that has been hailed by Robin Middleton as the first history of construction. This short essay by Rondelet, which has not been published but had won the prize for this academic competition, is certainly, I mean, if we get to read it now, it's quite unsatisfactory. Robin Middleton discusses it extensively in his monograph on Rondelet, published about 10 years ago. But unsatisfactory as it is, this attempt to write construction history gives us a solid symbolic starting point, 1799, okay, at the turn of a century. In this short, imperfect essay, Rondelet attempted to summarize the history of building since the birth of architecture. Since architecture, he argues, was born from the combination of three principal materials, trois matières principales, that is stone, brick, and timber, Rondelet feels that the history of building should also be subdivided in three parts, each dealing with the history of the use of one of these principal materials from antiquity to the present day. And let's say these general assumptions are always very important, and they differ following the different backgrounds and also theoretical positions. We might approach construction history chronologically, or we might approach it by establishing a basic difference in materials, as Rondelet did, or we might approach it, as Professor Ventura does in his outline, by a distinction between the different main ways in which structures behave, which is an entirely different issue. Again, we might also, let's say, categorize and classify problems in construction history following even other kinds of classifications, for example, by form. Now, so Rondelet, in tackling for the first time with the problem of writing construction history, gave his own solution in writing about the three different building materials. As much as we think it may be differently today, Rondelet's role cannot be underestimated, and not just for this first quite mysterious essay. Rondelet himself published important contributions that had to do with construction history in the main architecture dictionary published in this same period, the Dictionnaire d'Architecture by Quatremer de Quincy, published in different issues between 1788 and 1803. And most of all, Rondelet is responsible for a groundbreaking traité or treatise on the art of building, published since 1802 in different volumes, and since that date republished and translated in different languages for most of the 19th century. The traité, a great work of, let's say, immense complexity and knowledge, but also of great clarity. We see here a set of different volumes. We see here 4 volumes, some of them divided in text in 2 parts, or some of them divided in text and images. This very important treatise is still a valuable source today for engineers and historians alike, and a monument to the far-reaching implications of encyclopedic knowledge. While it is not a history book, but a complete treatise for the modern engineer, the traité incorporates the lesson of construction history in countless observations, notions, and examples. The whole treatise is completely digitized and available online, I think in different copies, also in different editions. The Italian edition and translation is on the site of the Politecnico di Milano, and the original French edition is on the Digitale Bibliothèque of the University Library of Heidelberg in Germany. So you can download it for free, and you can look at it online, which I would certainly recommend. With these well-prepared founding texts and conceptual, we could say, foundations, the gates to further research were opened. Since the early 1800s, Enlightenment narratives were transferred into the elaborate technical and historicist cultures of the Polytechnic schools in France and Germany. It is in this context that construction history becomes truly part, of a history of progress, of an ideology also of progress. As Thorstein Meyer argued in a recent essay, Polytechnic scholars firmly believed in the evolution of history, an evolution leading from tradition and error to scientific modernity. The concept of invention through transfer was used to trace and explain the progress of construction as seen through polytechnic eyes. What does invention through transfer means? In other words, we can also, still quoting Mayer, we can speak of the transferal of tried and tested knowledge from one construction technique to another. So it was the idea that construction techniques evolved in an incremental and steady manner by transferring, let's say, solutions that had worked from one to another situation, case, from one professional to another, and so on, and consolidating knowledge, just as if knowledge, if building knowledge was functioned like building a wall, okay, one brick at the time. Now we know that today, also historians of science don't agree totally with this simplified position. Okay, in the building of the wall, sometimes in the building of this metaphorical wall of knowledge, sometimes parts of the wall crumble down. Sometimes we go back to a brick that lays well below we are standing now because we feel it's more important or it represents something that we have forgotten, and so on. Okay, the building up of knowledge is something more complicated and less linear. But the 19th century attitude to progress and construction of knowledge was somewhat different than ours. Firmly organized back then by a chain of logically interconnected events, the history of building and building techniques found its place in the first decades of the 19th century in most polytechnic textbooks. It became not just a matter of erudition and curiosity, but a matter essential for the actual construction practice.